again, this is me, Robert, Mr. Root. Welcome to another tutorial. This time, actually a friend of mine told me I should do a tutorial about this, and this time we'll talk about how to make deep house. Yes, deep house. But there are plenty and many of different kind of deep house. Style is not a one kind of style, and there is a commercial deep house, there is a Balearic deep house, there is more atmospheric deep house, more underground or more commercial. I call it a little bit Russian deep house because loads of Russian great producers are doing this style. So enough walking with the dog. Let's go back to the studio.
It's not a problem that I can't fix, because I can do it in the mix.
Okay, as I said, there are different kinds of deep house, and but there are some distinctive things that are very common in most of the genres of sub-styles of deep house. It's the contrast between the very dry instruments and very wet with delays and reverbs, long delays, long reverbs, massive delays, massive reverbs, okay? At the same time, really in your face elements that are in contrast to those big and wide atmospheric instruments. And most of the time, it's actually the drums are those very dry, in-your-face elements in deep house, and the rest, the vocals, the pads, are those floating, long, reverbed elements in deep house style. And I prepare here two kinds of deep house. The first is more commercial. That's what I said. It's a little bit Russian deep house because loads of producers such as Filatov and Karas, or many of those are doing this. Recently, loads of cover songs are made in this style, and I'm no exception because actually I used vocals that my wife recorded for a TV program. By the way, if you will need any great vocals and you will need a great performer, check out her Facebook. The description will be here somewhere. And contact me or her, and she's amazing performer, amazing singer, so definitely worth checking. But first, listen to the first version I prepared for you. This is more commercial deep house.
That's the way it works. Happened so naturally. I didn't know it was love. The next thing I felt was you holding me close. What was I gonna do? I let myself go, and now I'm flying to the stars. I hope this night will last forever.
Okay, let's go through the elements, and I'll tell you why it's so distinctive and why this sort of commercial deep house, how it's made. Okay, so first of all, let's go with the drums. The drums are actually pretty simple. You don't need a lot of the drums must be really, really like 4x4s, like, and with simple hi-hats, maybe some other stuff, not too thick, not too many elements. If you listen to loads of these tracks, the drums are very, very simple. So the same I did here, but let me play it to you. Oh, just a second, let me correct one thing. Deep horse drums, okay. So first of all, the kick. The kick is very, again, in your face. It's very aggressive kick. The kick must be with this click, with this sort of like, it cannot be muffled. It must be very, very aggressive, clicky kick drum. So listen to my, the kick drum that I chose. You can hear that this one has this sort of like click thing. You can see that even here on the, in this area, there's a lot of information here from 1 kilohertz up. So this is a lot of, this is where this clicky thing is. Then the hi-hats. Okay, the hi-hats are pretty simple. However, all these hi-hats notes must be very, very short. So this is, I use, for hi-hats, I use Groove Agent SE 4 with, I just found a Tribal House kit, and I found 2 hi-hats that are actually fine. However, if you can see here, I normally, the release of this hi-hat was more or less like this. I shortened it to be as short as possible before it becomes unnatural. So you can listen to just the hi-hats. They are very, very, very short. Then we have obviously a snare, which is also very short snare. It cannot be a long snare. And and one thing, it's very, very dry. There is no reverb, no anything that will make it like sound big. No, it's very, very dry. And the last thing is a clap. However, the clap has is played minus 20 milliseconds before the snare. So if you remember my previous tutorials, I told you that it gives this sort of like effect. So this is what I've done with this snare, with this clap. So altogether, the drums are actually pretty simple. They sound like this. Okay, another thing that is very distinctive for this commercial deep house is the bass line. The bass lines are really, again, in your face. They are really powerful. So they are very loud. And in most cases, also pretty dry. Sometimes you can hear there is a bit of delay on the higher bass line. Let me play it to you and I'll explain how it works. Okay, I have 2 bass lines here. The high bass line, which is I used for that Retrolog, which is a Moog emulation that is native and generic to the to Cubase. And actually, what I did with this, I modified it a little bit, because first of all, it's a high-end bass. It's a higher bass. It's not a sub bass. So I had to high pass it. So I low cut everything below more or less 100 hertz. So there is no information about it over there. Then it's always nice and to have some distortion, because then the distortion will allow this the sound, this synthesizer bass to go more in front, to be more separated from the rest of the mix. And actually we want this bass to be in your face again. A little bit of ping pong delay. And the last one is the Supercharger GT. This is, as you remember, my compressor of choice. And this one is just to compress everything. As you can see, the compression is not big. 2.75, a little bit of saturation, a little bit of fatness. Everything else is just to give this sort of like aggressive, but in the same time controlled sound. What is important, because I placed ping pong delay before the supercharger, before the compressor. Why? Because I wanted also the delays to be hearable, that you can hear them. So yeah, I'm compressing the sound, the synthesizer sound, together with the delays. But the delays are not, they cannot be too, overwhelming. So that's why they only have 10% of mix and a short feedback. So listen to this high bass without the plugins, and listen, and then with the plugins. This is without, and this is with. So you can hear that there's loads of distortion, and there is this ping pong delay that is gives this bass line a lot of character. Then there is just a simple sub bass from Nexus this time. Actually, I forgot to turn off the reverb here. Okay, and this is sidechained with the kick. So again, just the pumping, because just for pumping effect, and then give the space for the kick, because this bass, lower bass, has this sort of like the same, is in the same spectrum, the same low range as a kick drum. So just to not just to give a space for the kick drum, it is sidechained with it, just to get it a little bit down every kick. So you can listen to this. Okay, so you have this very aggressive drums, very aggressive bass line. The rest actually has to be really nice and very floating. And that is why I have all my pads and all other instruments on another group, and they sound like this. Okay, what do I have? It's I have here the one pad. It's from Nexus. Okay. This is some arpeggiator from Flow, Flow Motion, that I reviewed like a week or 2 weeks ago. So I said that this has a lot of really nice arpeggiated instruments, presets. So actually I use one of them. However, again, loads of reverb. Okay. Another pad. This time it's from, this is actually Rhodes. These are Rhodes piano. So, and then as a lower bass line, but constant. It's on the same group. It's in the same sort of combined layered instrument with the Rhodes pads, arpeggiator, and this lower bass line. You can listen to this. Okay, it is also high passed. I also cut the low here. It's just to support and give the weight to the pads and more harmonics into the melody of the chords, the chord progression. So altogether, it sounds like this. Okay, now going back to the drums. Yes, going back to the drums. The drums, again, as I said, they are very aggressive. Also, they are aggressively processed. And it's like this. Most of the producers that are making this sort of style are using Ableton. And as you can see, I'm a Cubase guy, but they are using Ableton, and they use the OTT, which is one of the presets for multiband compressor in Ableton. But you can have the OTT, as they saying, the OTT power as a free plugin. And it's available on Mac and on PC. And this is sort of like a squasher. It's a multiband squashing compressor that is very distinctive to Ableton. And a lot of people are using it. And this deep house, this commercial deep house, it's very, very squashed. It's everything is compressed and squashed beyond imagination. So that is why I used for this the OTT, and without it, the drums sound like this. Okay, and with it, they sound like this. It's the same I did with the bass, and most possibly I would do the same kind of squashing on the master channel, just to squash everything together. The vocals, actually, yes, there are some things that you may do with the vocals when you're producing a deep house track. Again, loads of reverb. There's of course this trick with when you're cutting some parts of the main vocal, as I did here. Okay, and I used the this is Monica's vocal. I just took some parts, and I also sort of like pitch it down a little bit here. So it's a nice trick. So it makes. So you can hear it. It's together with the rest of the music. It gives this really funky, typical deep house groove. Right. Also about the groove. Most of the deep house tracks are swinged. There is a lot of swing, and the same I did here. So all the drums, the instruments have swing. So actually I used, let me see, there is around 50 something % of swing on the drums and the rest of the instruments. So it gives this sort of like, it's typical for commercial deep house to have this swing applied to the track. And then back to vocals. The vocals are again must be very again floating. Of course, there are rules to be broken, and you can do whatever you want. But we're talking about the general stuff. Okay. So I have here Monica's vocals.
Captured effortlessly, that's the way it was.
Okay, so what I did, actually it was recorded, as I said, for the TV program, and the dry vocals sound like this.
Happened so naturally, I didn't know it was love. The next thing I felt was you.
Okay, we recorded that at home. So what I did, there is a little bit of I already processed them in the recording session. Here I just modify them. So I have my my equalizer. This is Manley Massive Passive from UAD. It's very good it's very good passive equalizer, but there are also some other equalizers that are similar to this. It's very melodic. It's very organic, and I use it on vocals all the time. So as you can see, there are a little bit of boost in the mid and high. So without it, it sounds like this.
Holding me close, what was I gonna do?
So you already can hear that it's already more up. Then there is a vocal doubler, but I will come to that later in a moment. Then there is a compressor. So without the compression, it sounds like this.
I let myself go, and now we're flying to the stars. I hope this night will last forever. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm using for the Shadow Hills mastering compressor actually for the vocals, but I really like it on very dynamic vocals because this is this compressor actually. It's one of the most nicely working compressors on vocals, especially very dynamic vocals. So that is why I use this one. So it's the compression is, as you can see, quite not a severe one. So it's just like the ratio is 2 to 1, and there is not much of a gain reduction, maybe -2 dB. And there is a trick. You can do it by duplicating the tracks, the vocal track, and then moving slightly it like this. But then there is a really nice plugin. It's called the vocal doubler, and if I am not mistaken, it's free. What it does, listen to the vocal without it and then with.
Captured effortlessly, that's the way it was. Happened so naturally, I didn't know it was love.
Okay, it doubles the vocals it gives this sort of like, it multiplies the vocals. So instead of copying the vocals plenty of times, you just apply this on the on the on your vocal, and then it just multiplies it, and then you just can have, let's say, I'll show you how it works in the extreme settings.
The next thing I felt was you holding me close. What was I gonna do? I let myself go. And now I'm flying to the stars. I hope this night will last forever. Yeah.
Okay, so
Captured effortlessly. That's the way it was. Happens so naturally.
so you don't have, if you want, of course, you can put extreme settings of this plugin. However, it's it saves a lot of time and a lot of work, because previously I had to again copy the same vocal, move this a little bit, few milliseconds here, few milliseconds there, also detune it, all of those. So there's I can make a tutorial how to do it later. This saves a lot of time. There is one more trick. You can have a second voice which sounds like this. It's the same vocal, however, it's pitched down with the sound shifter from Waves. It's also a little bit high passed. Vocal doubler, compression, nothing much. However, together,
Didn't know it was love. The next thing I felt was you holding me close.
you can hear these two voices working together. It's also very distinctive to a lot of people are doing this, especially in deep house style. So if you have vocals, you can do this trick, and it will sound a little bit generic to this style. And then there are the effects. So again, loads of reverb and loads of delay.
Actually, I didn't know it was love. The next thing I felt was you holding me close. What was I gonna do?
So again, deep house, it's the contrast between stuff that and sounds that are dry in your face and those floating in the background. That's the whole trick. Okay, the next style is it's the Balearic deep house. It's totally different. The basics are also the same, and again, there's contrast between the dry instruments and this floating in the background. So let me play this more Balearic sound.
Captured effortlessly. That's the way it was. Happened so naturally. I didn't know it was love. The next thing I felt was you holding me close. What was I gonna do? I let myself go. And now I'm flying through the stars. I hope this night will last forever. Yeah.
Okay, so you can hear that it's totally different. The drums are more organic, more sort of like analog. They are not so aggressive. Again, they are dry, but not as aggressive. The bass line is supportive. It's more muffled. It's not in your face. It's nicer. So this is this more Balearic sound. So let me go through the drums of this first. Excuse me. So the drums sound like this. So you can hear automatically that I used a lot of classic drum machines emulations. So I have 808 here from battery. Then what's here I have? This is also 808. Here, what do I have here? It's also the same 808. I think I used also, yeah, that's the same thing. Anyway, 808, classic Roland 808 drum machine. So, and again, dry. So the kick, let's listen to all the elements here one by one. So we have here just a kick drum. So you can hear it doesn't have this click. You can add it, of course, it's up to you. However, it cannot be so aggressive like in the commercial deep house. Another thing, this is a simple hi-hat and a snare. However, what you can do is to emulate. So you can emulate this old school vintage sound, especially with battery, of the old samplers. Okay, they were not 16 or even 64-bit. Okay, they were 12 or 8-bit machines. So the sound was degraded. The sound was not perfect. And the same you can do with this style. You can do the same. And with battery, you have some emulations of MP60, Akai MP60, or S1200. So it's good to use sort of like degradation plugins, not to make these drum sounds too perfect. So you can hear them just that they are not very crispy. That's the whole trick. Another's, okay, this is the snare. The snare basically sounds like this without the plugins which I used. Okay, that is with a little bit of compression, but then a lot of distortion on it. So you can hear there's a lot of distortion. So it also allows the snare to break through and through the mix. The last element is wait, we have something here. Okay, a little bit of 808 toms, and the last thing is just a simple shaker loop that I found in my library of loops. Right? So again, everything is pretty dry in this. No reverbs on the drums. Obviously, on the drum group, you can use some tape emulations, more distorting, degrading emulations and plugins you will use, the better. it cannot be so sterile like the commercial deep house. And this is why I used, for example, the Ampex 102 real tape emulation saturation plugin from UAD. And these are the drums. Same with the bass line. The bass line has to be, again, supportive. Listen to the bass line. This time it's a Monarch from Native Instruments. It's a synthesizer for the reactor, but actually you can use any other Moog emulations. The rule is the bass again is supportive. It has to be a little bit muffled. It cannot be aggressive, just to give the groove and the bass line to the whole track. The rest are again the pads and the background instruments. And actually, I used for that, I use a more organic. Again, I like this word, organic sounds from Pad Shop, which is pad synthesizer from Cubase. It used the granular synthesis. So if you can listen to this, it sounds very nice. That's another Pad Shop. Then I use Absent, which is also very, very nice synthesizer from Native Instruments. So it has loads of really nice reverbs. So if you are not using Cubase, but you are using, let's say, Native Instruments Native Instruments Complete, then you will have this synthesizer in the package. And this is actually the same Nexus from the previous project. Also, this is nice. In Balearic, there are loads of different elements like this. So it gives this sort of like ambient, chill out feeling to the whole mix.
That's the way it works. Happens so naturally. I didn't know it was love. The next thing I felt was you holding me close. What was I gonna do? I let myself go, and I'm flying through the stars. I hope this night will last forever.
Okay, the last thing. I didn't use the pitch down vocal for this version. As you can see here, I have the normal vocal. This is pitched down vocal. Okay, I will write back in a moment on Facebook. Here it just didn't work. Okay, it has to be more nicer, more. Again, organic, not too processed. So that is why just a simple vocal with loads of reverb and loads of delays will be absolutely fine. This is how you do deep house, and there are plenty of other sub styles to deep house. The deep house is not one style. Again, these are just general rules that can be broken and should be broken by you. Remember what I said in my previous video. Listen to the other tracks and try to reverse engineer them, as I did with these two. As you can see, less means more. I haven't used a lot of plugins, just in the most important places, and that's about it. The more you put plugins in your mix, the more it degrades and the less clear it become. So sometimes just to balance the instruments or do proper EQing, high passing, and a bit of compression will do the trick. Anyway, this is it. I hope you enjoyed. Remember to subscribe. This time I remember the subscribe button should be somewhere here. Remember to subscribe, and if you have any comments and any more questions, please place them in the comment section. And you can also write me on Facebook, Mr. Root Music. See you again, and thank you for being with me and supporting me. There will be more stuff from me. See ya.
And I'm flying.